When I was about 8 years back in Uganda, in a small suburb in Kampala, we were having a game called Let's Dare to Dream. And that way we would ask ourselves, what do you want to be when you grow up? One of my friends said he wants to be a minister so that he can own a convoy of cars. Others wanted to be superheroes, and others wanted to be princesses. I said, when I grow up, I want to go to United Nations and tell them about the war and what it does to the children. I'm honored to be here today to be given a stage at the UNO high-level meeting of the General Assembly on human trafficking in persons. Unfortunately, the story I wanted to tell has evolved. Today, I'm here to tell you that the war opened doors to being trafficked. But also, I want to affirm to you that the journey of a trafficking victim does not begin the time when the trafficker shows up. It's most time and end results of generations or years of vulnerability that have been under-resourced, unreported, unnoticed. And this is a reality for so many survivors around the world. And this is going to be the reality for future victims if we do not work hard to address the causes of vulnerability among children, especially in post-conflict areas like ours. My name is Malaika Oringo from the Netherlands. I am the founder of Footprint to Freedom, a survivor-led organization that empowers survivors to take the front line in the fight against human trafficking. I work with Salvation Army as an inclusion and engagement specialist, and I'm a serving member for the International Survivor Advisory Council, inaugurated by the OSCE. Although today I stand before you as one, I bring with me thousands of voices of survivors across the world. First, I would like to acknowledge the efforts done by UNDC for giving survivors a stage and amplifying our voices in the last year campaign, Victims Leading the Way. And talking about impact, let me share with you some quotes that were shared by resilient survivors. Marcella, the key to successful reintegration is psychological support. Chandra, our narrative must not merely be inspiring, but the lessons that lie within them must be turned into solutions. Jerem Elam, I have put a face on anti-human trafficking crime and began to shatter the stereotype that men are not for sale. Senga John Baptist, Footprint to Freedom, I understand the importance of integration, so I offer survivors the support I wish to have as a victim. Kando, learning from victims and experience and turning their suggestions into concrete actions will lead to more victim-centered and effective approach in combating human trafficking. Now, hearing such wisdom from a diverse of survivors, this affirms that survivors are the most significant stakeholders in the fight against human trafficking. However, their voices are most fixed on sharing their victim stories. Less than 10% of victim voices are included in the decisions that lead to the implementation of policies and laws. Yet survivor narrative is very important in establishing effective strategies that addresses prosecution, prevention, and reintegration. Because survivors know firsthand the tactics, the strategies that traffickers use to bound victims into slavery. For this reason, I call you all member states to leverage on survivor wisdom and invest in survivor leadership. Here are some of the few recommendations from the survivor perspective. We need to see more meaningful partnership with survivors and shift from symbolic survivor engagement. We call that exploitation. We need to see more increase in the quality of mental support for survivors, which is customized to their needs, and it should be long-term. We need also to see improvement in how victims are treated during legal proceeding. They need to be victim-centered and trauma-informed. There's need to stop the narrative of a perfect victims, because looking for a perfect victim among victims is the major reason why prosecution and conviction rates are low, because it blinds us from seeing victims that are standing before our very eyes. And this is a reality for migrant survivors, because their victimhood is addressed as a migration issue. We need non-discriminatory support. In most countries, the duration of assistance offered to victims is often linked to ongoing investigation. I became a victim of this notion. I was left undocumented for 10 years without a right to access medication or going to school or access to shelter. This left me vulnerable to re-exploitation and exposed me to gender-based violence. But most of all, we need to see accountability, not only from traffickers, but to all agencies that are involved. For example, the civil service sector. We need accountability for the quality of services that you offer to victims and survivors. And the private sector. We need to see accountability to address exploitation that is in your supply chains. The law enforcement, we need accountability to see that you are victim-centered and trauma-informed. And most of all, to the governments, you need to be accountable to having systems in the place that facilitate the demand of exploitive services. For example, the kafala system in the Gulf states, the legalization of prostitution in Europe, corruption, and impunity of traffickers. And lastly, the United Nations should foster survivor engagement and inclusion among member states as a mandate when they are forming their policies in research and in discussion regarding reintegration. My last remark, we need to value the lived experience. We should not undermine it. Even at 8 years, back in Uganda, where voices of children are undermined, I still felt the importance and understood the importance of lived experience and the need to be at the table when it comes to matters that affect our lives. Now that I have a voice and I have a stage and agency, I want to call you all to action. When you come into space and discussing human trafficking, I want you to ask yourself, whose voice are you representing? And whose voice is missing on the table of representatives? And why is this voice missing? Answering this question is very key to achieve authentic survivor inclusion. And we need to look beyond compassion and turn our empathy into action. Sharing trauma stories is not enough. We need to share stories of resiliency and stories of hope. And we need to put more efforts in getting survivor accessibility to restoration programs, education, employment, and funding survivor-led initiatives. Pity is not enough. Survivors need more opportunities to strive. Thank you.